Pedophile cousin. I posted a story on here not too long ago about my sister's creepy ex John. Well, this is about my cousin now. It happened a year before the encounter with John. I was 9 years old. My family was living with my auntie in her small crowded house. My auntie, her daughter Stacy, my cousin Valerie, and my mom used to drink a lot in that house. So I dreaded the days when it turned night because I would have to hear people in the living room and kitchen laughing loudly, screaming at the top of their lungs to some old country songs, and fighting. We live in a reserve, so it happened a lot. All reserve parties are rowdy and end with someone fighting. This was a daily thing while living in that house. I noticed a guy who was always there every night. They would party because he was one of the first people to show up for the party. When they started to arrive, I would take my younger siblings to the room and stay in there until we fall asleep. One night, I was wanting a glass of water, so I went out of the room, even though the party was still happening, and poured myself a glass of water. While I was doing that, I noticed the guy who was always first to arrive was staring at me. Never took his eyes off of me. Creeped out, but I paid no attention to it. The next day he comes over during the daytime, around like 4 in the afternoon, and my mom introduces me to him, saying he was my cousin that I never met. He seemed nice at first, but he threw off a vibe, and I got a bad feeling about him. I kept my distance from him. Later on that night, I was keeping my younger siblings and little cousins, while my mom and auntie and them went out to pick up some alcohol. I didn't mind because at least it was just us kids in the house, and we get to run around the house and do whatever we wanted. So we were playing in the laundry room, shutting off and on the lights and dancing. We heard that if you dance while the lights were flashing on and off repeatedly fast, and if you stop dancing, keep the light on, and look at your shadow, it would still be dancing, so we tried it. Creepy, I know, nothing happened. Until we heard a knock at the door, which made us all jump scared. I went to go answer it, because I was the oldest in the house at the time. It was him. I froze and just stared. He then said, "Is your auntie home?" I replied, "No." He then said, "How about your mom?" I then replied again, "No." I knew it was stupid to say they were not there, but he was my cousin, and I didn't think anything of it at the time. He then told me he would be back later to come check up on us, as in us kids. I said, "Okay then shut the door and locked it." I wasn't in the mood to play with the kids after that, so I just sat on the couch and watched High School Musical. My auntie, mother, and the rest got back, so I took the kids in the room and put them to bed. I stayed in there too because no way I'm going to be around drunks. I've been around drunks basically every night, up until from when I was 6 until 17. Probably one of the reasons why I don't drink or do drugs at all. Later that night, I noticed the door creaking open slowly, then a male figure walk in. It was dark and I was half asleep myself. I just stared until he got to the edge of the bed where my little brother was sleeping. He was at the edge, my baby sister was in the middle, and I was at the corner. He just stared at him. Then I finally got some word out and said, "What are you doing?" Because he was trying to lift up the blanket. He then looked at me and said, "Oh, your mom told me to come check up on you guys." He then walks out of the room and shuts the door behind him. I tried to go back to bed, but not 5 minutes after that incident, he came back in, shut the door, locked it with a butter knife, and turns to me. He then said, "Have you ever seen a penis before?" Right then and there, I felt sick to my stomach. I tried to tell him to get out or I'm screaming for my cousin Stacy, but the words never were able to leave my lips. When I didn't say anything, he crawled under the bottom bunk, we had a bunk bed, to where I was, and takes off the blanket from me, and tries to take off my shorts, but I pulled it up before he could take them down below my waist. I said no. Then he looked at me again, this time, up at my face. "Have you ever seen a penis before?" I still could not get the words out. I was frozen and just stared at him in complete, utter shock. He crawled away from me, and back to the door, and kept repeating that scary sentence. I then had enough courage to say to him, "Get out, or I'm screaming for Stacy, and she'll come in here if I call for her. And if she finds you in here, with all those guys out there, they'll beat you up outside." He stared at me for a while, then left. I couldn't sleep after that, so I stayed up. My cousin Valerie came in, and got an extra bed from our room. I asked her, "Did everyone leave? Is Ryan gone?" She said, "Yeah, he's gone. Don't worry about it. Just go back to bed." Then she left out of the room. 5 minutes later, my mom walks in and crawls on the top bunk. I say to her, "Mom, Ryan tried to rape me." I cried just saying that. She was quiet for a while, then finally said, "Are you sure?" I told her, "Yeah, I'm sure. He tried to take off my shorts and touch me down there." She got up so mad. She wanted to leave and kick his ass, but then I said, "Mom, you think I should tell Dad so he can beat him up?" She replied, "No, don't tell your dad. I'll deal with Ryan myself." My parents were separated for 2 years. Big mistake. The next day when I woke up, Ryan was in there in the kitchen laughing and chatting with my mom. I never felt so betrayed in my life. I hate his guts. Even to this day, I never trusted my mom again. I never tell her anything. I still see Ryan around the reserve from time to time. I get instantly mad when I see him. I always tell my little sister, even though she's 14 now, to never, ever go near Ryan. Ever. That he's a child molester. I should have told my dad. I told my older sister about it, and she knew something was off about him. My old best friend hated his guts too. I guess Ryan did a hit and run on her dad, and her dad died instantly after he was hit. Ryan, karma will come to you. Until it does, let's never meet again. Pathological liar and campus creep. I met this dude Ryan on a film screening on my college campus in Texas. He approached me and my friend Sarah after the movie had ended. Ryan was probably in his early 20s, short, tan, and wore his mirrored motorcycle sunglasses constantly, even indoors. He started conversations with us by mentioning that he could speak the language that the film was in. It was subtitled. He also told us he was a polyglot who could speak French, Spanish, Italian, and even several other languages. We figured, well, you don't meet someone like that every day, and we're pretty content to let this guy follow us to a dining hall and hang out over dinner. While we were eating, Ryan mentioned he was a musician. He talked about his guitar, which is something that guitar players generally do, I guess. Then he said he had studied under Alexei Leho from Children of Bodom, and that Leho had taught him how to speak Finnish. No fucking way. Later he told us that he had trained himself to sing in 2 different tones from his vocal cords at the same time. But I can't do it anymore, he added. He walked with us around campus throughout that night, making more and more outrageous claims. My friend went back to her dorm when it got late, but this guy kept walking with me in the dark, not taking the hint that it was time to go home. At some point he mentioned having a wife who lived with him near campus. He also started talking about a goth girl we knew. I saw her standing at an apartment window once with 2 other guys. Some weird shit was going down. I humored Ryan by asking him to elaborate. He said something about blood splashing everywhere, but refused to go into detail. I just shook my head and said that it probably wasn't what he thought it was. Meanwhile, I was thinking I probably need to get away from this dude ASAP, so I said I was tired and goodbye. I guess I offended Ryan somehow, because the next time I saw him, he wasn't happy to see me. He was standing at the register in a dining hall, wearing a work uniform and for once no sunglasses. He swiped my card without saying a word, but paused long enough to glare at me with his cold, inhuman expression. I actively avoided Ryan from that point on, at least until a few semesters later, when he ended up in the same theater class as me. Our class was staging a play with instrumental music. Ryan told the professor he had already acquired a music degree from Berkeley, and this lie caused the instructor to assign Ryan the duty of composing original music for that production. Not surprisingly, the music didn't turn out well. Meanwhile, the other musicians in that class hated his incompetent guts. Ryan had it out for one of the musicians, Dave, because he was a close friend of mine. Throughout the semester, Ryan berated Dave in front of his classmates, trying to physically intimidate him, and even pointed remarks in Dave's presence about how he owned a knife and could kill a man. Dave was pretty sure Ryan lived somewhere close to his apartment complex, based on how frequent the guy seemed to be around, so Dave started taking roundabout routes from his home to campus, trying to make it less obvious where his apartment was. Eventually, he was spooked enough to mail our prof and the college dean about what was going on. He gave the police some information about Ryan, too, although there was nothing they could do about it. We didn't see Ryan around much after the semester ended, but we've heard stories. Dave's old roommate knows Ryan's old roommate, who says their time sharing a dorm room was hellish. Ryan apparently had a habit of coming home at about 3 a.m. and loudly rummaging around while talking to himself. His then roommate once confronted him about it, saying, "Did your mother raise you to be like that?" Ryan reacted by calling up his mother right then and there and demanding that his roommate apologize to her. And that's only the tip of the iceberg. According to his old roommate, Ryan also made weird, unprompted comments about how he hates Hitler, but also respects him. The roommate even suspects that Ryan was following him around campus for no discernible reason. People in the music department are very leery of Ryan. He spends a lot of free time there, playing the same few songs over and over on his guitar. He keeps saying he wants to go audition for Guitar Studio, but never does. He also tells every new person he meets that he studied under a famous musician, a different name each time. One classmate of mine had the strange experience of being invited into Ryan's home and meeting his wife. Apparently, Ryan wasn't lying about that. This classmate described his wife as a shell of a woman who just performs household duties and doesn't talk. I have no idea what's happened to Ryan since all this stuff happened. I moved far away and haven't seen or heard of him again, but I really hope the guy has been institutionalized. The exterminator next door. This is not something that happened to me, but to some very good friends of my husband's family. This was almost 10 years ago, and the family now jokes about it as if it were nothing. But I could not imagine going through this. My husband's mom is a very good friend with a woman, Jennifer, and he has best friends with their two kids, Kenny and Ryan. They were teenagers at the time of this story. Jennifer had recently divorced the boy's dad and moved into a house in a new neighborhood where they didn't know anybody. Kenny was 18 years old and Ryan was 15, and they were both very into music and various other instruments. Ryan has a drum set that ended up causing trouble in basically every place they lived, this house being no exception. Ryan always made sure not to break noise ordinances, but neighbors in quiet neighborhoods don't take kindly to any disruption at any time of day. So Jennifer had to put up with quite a few complaints. She didn't really mind. She always told her neighbors her son had every right to practice his drums and they could shove it. Usually that worked well, but one time, it didn't. The man who lived immediately beside them was a nice enough guy, middle-aged and lived alone, and worked as an exterminator. He even offered some free sprays around the property for them whenever he did his own house when they moved in. But like most people, he didn't like to hear drumming every day. I don't know his name, let's call him Tom. So it started out pretty normal. Tom would come over when he thought it was getting a little late for Ryan to be drumming, and Jennifer usually was pretty nice about it, and said she'd make sure he'd stop by 10, local noise ordinance cut off in residential areas. But eventually, she got really sick of his visits, and they started to happen every single time Ryan started playing his drums, even in the middle of the day. If this guy was home, he'd come over to complain. Kenny started answering the door instead, and basically telling the guy to fuck off and stop coming over. This only seemed to make him more persistent. Tom started calling, not sure how he got their number, multiple times a day. Sometimes in the middle of the night, to scream at Jennifer about her boys being stupid assholes, and how she was a dumb slut who couldn't keep a man around to teach those boys a lesson. Jennifer ignored the calls and him coming over for a while, until eventually, Kenny threatened to call the police if he didn't stop harassing them. The guy backed off, and everything seemed fine for a long time. They were finally starting to make friends in the neighborhood and really settle in. One day, Jennifer was out with her mother-in-law while Ryan and Kenny went to a local baseball field to play with some friends. They got home before Jennifer, then realized the front door was slightly open. Figuring one of them had been a doofus and forgot to close it when they left, They just strolled inside. Kenny walked through the front hall to the living room, where he had a good view of the kitchen. In the kitchen, he saw a man in a full exterminator suit and gas mask, spraying something around the room. Around this time, Ryan called to him from the other side of the house, asking if Kenny could smell something weird. This alerted Tom that people were in the house again. Turned around and saw Kenny standing there, still holding a baseball bat, and darted out the back door in the kitchen. Kenny chased him, but Tom got back into his house and locked the doors before Kenny could get him. Kenny went home, got Ryan out of the house, and called the police. But when they questioned Tom, he, of course, denied everything. And as there were no witnesses, they had to let him go. Jennifer got the house tested for toxins, while her and the boys stayed in the hotel, and the result came back with deadly amounts of pest poison in every inch of the house. It was bad enough that her renter's insurance had to pay out to replace every bit of furniture, clothing, and anything else porous they owned. I know it's not a very climactic story, but it terrifies me thinking what would have happened had they not caught the guy and stayed in that house, and the fact that the psycho is still out there with access to multiple toxic substances. Hot and cold. This happened between 2012 and 2013. Not sure if it qualifies compared to some of the other stories I've seen, but it was certainly what anyone would consider a creepy ex. I'll further reference him as Ryan. 2012 was the year my marriage started to wane, and my husband and I had been separated. He opted for a stripper from his hometown that we happened to live in, and I decided to take up a relationship with a coworker at the nursing home I worked at. I was 22 at the time and Ryan was 50. I don't make a big deal out of age, and he was very kind to me while we worked there together. I went someone well for about 6 months. He seemed very detached, and I was accustomed to that. Nonetheless, when he texted me saying he wanted to talk, I assumed that he wanted to break up with me, somewhat correctly, and I accepted it with a heavy heart when I drove to his apartment to hash it out. Apparently, that wasn't something he wanted. He'd expected me to fight against the impending breakup and demand to stay with him. I was absolutely shocked. It was the most emotion he'd shown since we started seeing each other. What transpired afterwards was a complete departure from his previous behavior. He began calling and texting me constantly, demanding to see me despite my restricting work hours, and had since quit his job at the nursing home to devote more time to me. During all of this, my husband had decided to move out with a stripper. I was wrecked financially and driven into a hole of depression with nothing but my 2 cats and an increasingly clingy older man demanding my attention. Eventually it turned into an on and off type of thing. I would try to extricate myself from the relationship. He would turn on the guilt to suck me back in. He knew I was in the middle of a divorce and was already planning on us moving in together and getting married. In the last month of that situation, I finally told him to leave me alone so I could figure my life out. He wouldn't stop. He left notes under my windshield wiper, dozens of texts on my phone, going even so far as to come into my apartment while I wasn't home to check on my cats while I was at work. He had a key to my door I gave him when times were good, but the landlord refused to change the locks. I checked. The coolant tubing on my car had been cut one morning, almost overheating my engine, and I can't help but wonder if Ryan did it, so I'd have to call him to pick me up. He talked about driving by my work and my home in his text to see what my hours were like. Salvation from this overbearing barrage came in the form of my estranged father, who agreed to allow me to move in with him to get back on my feet. That's when things started to get ugly with Ryan. I told him in text that I'd be leaving the state with my dad, hoping he'd finally get a clue and just leave me the fuck alone. But it only seemed to make him angrier. He flip-flopped between calling me a heartless cunt and practically weeping, threatening to come over and make me come home with him if he felt I was in danger. I never saw Ryan again after I left the state, but his texts wouldn't stop coming for a good 5 months after the move was complete, begging me to tell him where I'd gone so he would come see me, in between calling me a black widow who kills everything she touches or something to that effect. I got a message on Facebook from him. every holiday and anniversary until 2015. Ryan, forgive me for saying this, but let's not meet again. 10-year creeper. When I was about 16 years old, I joined this social networking site, my first ever, called FTJ. Very typical. One day I got a message from a random guy, Ryan. He started talking to me, and after looking at his profile and seeing that the man was 26 years old, I didn't really have much interest in speaking to him. He was asking some strange questions to begin with. Things like, I see in one picture you're wearing black fishnets, but in the other you're wearing a pink sweater. What's that about? I did the typical short answer, assuming that he'd get the hint like the rest. He stopped talking to me, and I thought that was that. No big deal, no different from anyone else really. Now, if anyone remembers or knows at all, AOL Instant Messenger had the option to put up an away message if someone you decide to leave your computer for an extended period of time. Since everyone on my buddy list was someone I know in person and I hung out with at least 2 or 3 times, I found no harm in putting my cell number up there. A few weeks later, I get a phone call on my cell phone. It's a number I don't recognize, so naively, I pick up the phone. Hello? Hi, Meg. Yes? It's Ryan. I didn't put 2 and 2 together until he mentioned his screen name. Oh, hi. You said to call you if anyone was bored, and I'm bored. So what are you up to? Please keep in mind that this was a 26-year-old calling a 16-year-old. He asked if I wanted to hang out next weekend, and I say maybe, which meant no, but I didn't have the heart to say maybe because I was stupid. The next weekend swings by, and he calls me and starts trying to make plans, and I'm trying to make sure I get out of these plans. 2 things that really raised red flags that made me absolutely 100% positive I had no zero fucking interest in meeting him. Number 1, he asked for my address to pick me up at my house. Number 2, he asked me how I felt about doing anything sexual because he was still on the rebound. I said a very firm no to both of those questions. I didn't really know how to say no, and I was naive enough to believe that he was just a guy down on his luck. So throughout the years, I let him keep in contact with me, seldomly, and strictly online or by phone. After a while, though, his being overdramatic, his inappropriate ideas of friendship, he thought it was okay for 2 friends to shower together or sleep naked in bed next to each other, his lack of listening skills, and his white knighthood got so annoying that more often than not, I'd just be mean and vocally express my irritation with him. Never proven, but he seemed to lie to get attention. For instance, at one point, he called me crying his eyes out because his friend, Pam, had died in a car accident, and he was on his way to tell her son that mommy isn't coming home. I tried to comfort him. I told him I was sorry for his loss. About a week later, we had had a fallout, and we weren't on speaking terms. Either way, I got a sobbing voicemail from him, and it said begging me to call him back. He had just found out that his friend Pam had died in an accident, and that he was going over to tell her son, and needs my help essentially in 2 weeks. Pam died twice. He'd just say and do strange things. Remember MySpace? Remember the hero section? I was under there. I talked to him once in a blue moon. Wasn't my kindness to him. Repeatedly shut him down and he thought I was his hero? Okay. One night, he was talking to me online, and I passed out with my laptop on. So, his messages went unread for the entire night, and it wasn't anything important. I woke up to 5 missed phone calls on my cell phone, and 2 voice messages, both him crying his eyes, and one with him bawling, begging for no silence, not the silence. The most inappropriate thing he ever did was a week after my father died. I had barely mentioned my father to him. He had never met my father. He had never spoken to my father. He decided to write a poem, dedicated to him, about what a wonderful man he was, and how the world will be a darker place without him. But 50% of the poem was talking about the reason why he was so great, because he had raised such a wonderful daughter. He always got upset with me if I went out with another man, platonic or otherwise. One of my friends I got out of rehab, and Ryan made fun of him, saying that I would only hang out with people from the loony bin, even though they are two completely different things. Edit. Around the age of 19, I did run into him at a concert. We barely spoke 2 words to each other, as he talked with a few other people, and I was preoccupied with people that I come with. That was the only time I ever met him in person since then. I avoided getting together in the future altogether. When I turned 19 years old, I left for Paris to study. He and I hadn't spoken in a while, and he was dating a 17-year-old girl. Once they broke up, he started talking to me again, crying about how they were meant to be. By the end of it, I couldn't help but notice that they had been broken up for a while, and he had actually been stalking her for a year. When she started dating someone else, and Ryan's reaction to it all was to call her friends, her new boyfriend, her family. And I just don't mean mom and dad, I mean uncles and aunts too, and messaged them on any social networking site. She even called him to tell him to leave her alone once and for all, and he recorded it too, and sent it to me. After that, he moved on, and he somewhat moved on to me. He sent me a long message, expressing his undying affection and devotion for me, because he now realizes that he and I were meant to be together. He said that he was so ready to make this work, he'd move to Paris with me. I calmly explained that I was not interested in him, and that I was sorry if I hurt him or I misled him in some way, shape, or form. He ended up getting upset and bringing up things that didn't even fucking happen. Things like I called him when I lost my V-card, nope. How he and I were always the best of friends, nope. How I'm just scared to open myself up to him, nope. And once that failed, it turned to anger. Well, you went through a slut phase. Well, I'm sure the next guy you date will use you up dry, too, and leave. Have fun being a whore. Once he realized that he was getting nowhere with me romantically, he attempted to play the big brother role, constantly asking me if I was okay, if I knew where I was going with my life, trying to offer me advice on how to live my life, and lecturing me if I did something he disapproved of. We stopped talking after that, because I didn't feel comfortable anymore. It took me years, but I finally stopped speaking to him. A few years later, Facebook had blossomed, and lo and behold, he found me. He friended me, and I accepted his friend request. He started talking to me, and I felt like we had probably both grown since we last spoke, and why not give us a talking chance? I was wrong. He had not grown. He was still being this overdramatic white knight who felt like the world owed him something. Below are some messages I was able to salvage before we cut off contact completely 2 years ago. In this conversation, I let him know that I was trying to move on and essentially get my shit together. I was 24 years old, so around the time one does. I've been wondering when you'd figure it out. You have any idea how long I've been wanting to say something? You would have yelled at me, so I waited for you to figure it out on your own. I'm really glad you're becoming aware. But something tells me you lost something, or someone important to you, as a result of your old habit. You know how hard it was for me to let go of someone? But you know what? I'm really happy that I finally did. It's like a burden off my shoulders, like I'm being freed by something. How's it feel so far? Do you feel more relaxed? Or feel you notice things you didn't before in people? Nothing bad has happened. Good. Hey, don't be shy around me. This was his reaction when I told him I was going on a date that night. He had asked me to hang out maybe 5 minutes before the conversation took place, and the date was already planned a day in advance. No. I'm mad I've been wanting to see you for years. A guy you haven't seen in a decade comes by and gets the grand tour, while the guy you've known has been waiting gets shoved on the back burner again. The no-see, no big deal gets front row seats, while the big fan for years gets the no-bleed seats. I've known this kid a lot longer than I've known you. I've known him since I was 12. So 1 year difference is a long time to you. You knew me when I was 16. 4 year difference. You're making way too big a deal out of this. I'm not going out of my way to hurt or irritate you. I knew you 2 years before you lost virginity, Meg. I've known you longer than that. I was a sophomore in high school when we met. I was 16. You don't have to go out of your way. You do it just by never giving me any fair chance. What do I deserve, Meg? No fair treatment, discrimination, patience is supposed to be rewarding. I'm very sensitive to you, you know that. And after what I went through with you-know-who, I just want to smile right now. I was impressed, concerned. One thing led to another, and before I knew it, I found you attractive. Not just physically, but emotionally. For years, I'd hoped you survive, but instead, I saw you try drugs, go through a slight slut phase, hang out with the wrong people, hurt people who would never wanted to hurt you. I watched you date bad guys, while a nice one who loved you watched for years, like a form of torture. You might not have been my friend, but I was always yours. Friends are not the ones you care about. Friends are the ones who care about you. I'm sorry. I saw so much potential in you. Call me when you get off. You can talk to me on your way to your fuck toy. We don't speak at all anymore.